Story 1. Westworld is a noteworthy series. The first season is considered one of the best in television history. The second season is decent, but the third and fourth seasons were so unwatchable that HBO decided to move on from them. Story 2. Weeds. What started as a lighthearted show about a new widow housewife selling marijuana on the side to make ends meet eventually devolved into the main character marrying a Mexican drug cartel leader and having his child. It strayed so far from the original premise that it is almost laughable. Story 3. True Detective's first season is one of the greatest accomplishments in the history of television. The others are forgettable at best. Story 4. Cobra Kai. The first season was a perfect deconstruction and reframing of the original Karate Kid. Everything after that has strayed further from the core of what made that series worth watching in the first place. Johnny and Miguel's relationship. Story 5. Heroes. The first season was incredible, and I want to say the second was good too. But it went downhill when they started promoting Nissan so blatantly. Dad, you got me the new Nissan Rogue? Oh my gosh. Then it gets stolen in the same episode, never to be seen again. The show declined significantly after that. Story 6. Heroes is the clear answer here. The first season was incredible and unmatched in quality thereafter. I also believe Prison Break faced similar issues. That show had an outstanding first season, but after being renewed, it seemed they struggled to find direction in the storytelling. Story 7. Bones. I liked it at the beginning. It was fun. Then she had a baby, got into a relationship with Booth, and it went downhill. I didn't even bother finishing it. Story 8. Leave out a season. I saw a perfect pilot that quickly declined. The following stars Kevin Bacon. It has a brilliant premise. An FBI agent fighting a jailed serial killer who unleashes his followers to punish him. However, it starts to get really bad soon because in every episode, some random character suddenly reveals themselves as a follower. I quit after the 5th episode when the female constable from a small town shoots the Iceman character and reveals herself as a follower. Story 9. I loved the first season of Designated Survivor. After that, it changed. The same thing happened with The Good Fight. After one main character left, it was downhill all the way. Story 10. Star Trek. Discovery is a fascinating series. The first season truly captured my attention. It was different and had a lot of intriguing elements, but the main downside was its tendency to take itself too seriously, culminating in an ending that felt rushed, as if they expected to have another episode or two. The second season featured many good aspects. It adopted a lighter tone and explored characters who didn't receive much development in the first season. We also see Pike and Spock. However, it began to become overly self-indulgent, frequently pausing for Michael to deliver heartfelt speeches about the importance of her crew, even in urgent situations. You have only minutes to save the galaxy, and you're stopping to discuss your feelings? By the third season, it started to feel like a chore. There were still positive elements, but the overall mood shifted. Instead of enjoying it while occasionally rolling my eyes, I found myself enduring until we reached the good parts. And there were good parts. The mystery of the burn, a galaxy without the Federation, and limited warp capability were intriguing. One of my favorite lines came from this season, spoken by a Romulan. Vulcans will choose whatever suits them best, and then insist that it's only logical. However, there was also a lot that was difficult to watch. I recall an early episode where they encountered a strange gravity anomaly, causing people to be thrown from their seats and sustain serious injuries. It almost felt like the show was sadistically highlighting the absurdity of not having seatbelts, which at least appeared twice in previous Star Trek series. In the fourth season, we were introduced to the Romulan sword-wielding nuns. I lost interest when Michael's mother began distributing swords and declared, "We're going to do this our way." At that moment, I genuinely expected the Starfleet crew to challenge this trope. I thought they would argue against abandoning their ranged, non-lethal weapons for swords, which they were untrained to wield. I always want to see that conversation whenever a show decides to feature sword fights in a setting with firearms. Shortly after that scene, they were ambushed by rival sword-wielding nuns, resulting in several deaths that could have been avoided had the attackers been subdued by a barrage of phaser fire. I haven't returned to the series since. A few times I considered finishing it, but I ended up rewatching Strange New Worlds instead. Story 11, House of Cards. I subscribed to Netflix solely to watch that show, but by the end, I could not finish the last season. Story 12. Every episodic detective show attempts to add a storyline, particularly an arch-nemesis. Examples include Murdoch Mysteries, Monk, The Mentalist, and Castle. Story 13. Riverdale's first season was not too bad, but each subsequent season became progressively worse to the point of being unwatchable. Story 14. The X-Files started off well but repeatedly encountered evidence only to lose it. The series never evolved from its original plot and continuously found ways to repeat itself, similar to Gilligan's Island, which also followed a repetitive storyline. Story 15. The Walking Dead, without a doubt, had some of the best zombie television in its first few seasons. After season 5 or 6, however, the show included many filler scenes. There were long shots of random dead bushes and trees for almost a minute, contributing nothing to the plot. Come on, Carl. Story 16. There are countless television shows to consider. Off the top of my head, the following: Heroes, Deadwood, The Walking Dead, Hemlock Grove, 90s X-Men, Fringe, Dexter, Hannibal. Most shows tend to have a disappointing final season, with only a few exceptions, assuming they can maintain quality for that long. Story 17. Lost had a great premise and strong first and second seasons. However, they struggled to maintain direction and could not conclude the story effectively. Story 18. Once the man in the high castle moved further into coexisting timelines, I was done. I never read the series it was based on and enjoyed the show as alternative history, not so much as it turned into more mystical realism. Story 19. Once the shows have about 3 seasons and turn main characters into oddly matched romantic partners, it is finished. Story 20. Raised by Wolves had so much promise but continued to go down a rabbit hole without stopping. Season 2, I can't wait to hear some answers, but it just adds another layer of mysteries with no conclusions. Story 21. You will never see a show that captures the post-September 11 vibe better than Battlestar Galactica. The show essentially falls apart after a very strong start to Season 3. Story 22. Doctor Who from 2005. I loved the show until midway through Matt Smith's time as the Doctor. Then they began to completely disintegrate their own established lore, and the plots became so absurd that it became unbearable. An additional issue was that I could not stand Clara Oswald. She was just mean. Story 23. Dexter swore it would never happen again. Game of Thrones got to me, and I was frustrated that it happened again. When you feel the quality starts to slip, that's the time to step away. There is no need to consume media you don't enjoy. Story 24. Alias S1 was excellent, but it quickly declined with the introduction of ancient prophecy elements. The hot ninja girl spy in costumes, along with international travel while keeping unsuspecting hometown friends in the dark, was enough for me. Story 25. The Office. The last couple of seasons were not the lighthearted comedy it used to be. It became quite depressing. It was never the same without Michael Scott. Story 26. Boardwalk Empire. Started strong. The first few seasons were amazing. After Jimmy's actions towards his mother, I was done. Story 27. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina was not a great show to begin with, but it seemed promising during the first few episodes. I enjoyed the first season, found the second season bearable, but the third season was catastrophic. I didn't even bother to watch the last season. It always felt like several screenwriters were working against each other, trying to undermine the storylines created by others while reinforcing their own. It turned into a chaotic mess, and I am still frustrated about that. Story 28. House MD, though its decline was better than most. The first 3 seasons were excellent. The next 3 seasons took a definite step down in quality, but there were still episodes worth watching. The last season was painful. Story 29. Prison Break. I am almost done with the second season, and I cannot see how they can continue this series. I am just watching out of spite at this point. Story 30. The first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones were absolutely perfect, but it progressively declined in quality, and by season 8 it was disappointing. Story 31. Designated Survivor has an intriguing storyline, but eventually, it becomes focused on the daily politics of passing various bills. It may improve later on, but I'm not sure I can continue watching to find out. Story 32. Pose was not bad, but the series finale focused primarily on a gay man who used black transgender women as emotional outlets for his insecurities. Story 33. Sleepy Hollow. The first 2 seasons were great. It lost my interest somewhere in the first few episodes of season 3, and I never returned for season 4. Story 34. That would be Pretty Little Liars for me. The pilot was a great hook, and the first 2 seasons were perfectly good. Then it went completely off the rails and wouldn't end. Story 35. The Changeling. I was hooked in the beginning, but by episodes 6 and 7, it became too unrealistic and strange. I couldn't finish it. Story 36. Go ahead and make fun of me for being past the teenage years, but I loved the first season of the show Roswell. The second and third seasons were painful. Story 37. Heroes was fantastic in its first season, but once it completed the Save the Cheerleader, Save the World story arc, it declined rapidly. Story 38. Another answer. I loved season 1 of Ghost Hunters. I have always wanted to believe in ghosts even though I don't. 99% of that season was them investigating hauntings and conclusively proving that all of the ghost phenomena were perfectly explainable by normal means. There were whole episodes with no paranormal activity. When they conducted investigations where unusual events were occurring, it made it much more exciting and believable. However, they increased the manufactured drama and the fake ghost elements so much in later seasons that it became almost comical. I couldn't get through season 2. I am still completely convinced that there is no such thing as ghosts, but I would still love to be proven wrong. Maybe one day, something unusual will happen to me. Story 39. I feel like I see the same shows repeatedly when these questions are posted, so I'll mention a random one. The Cleaning Lady. It was never a particularly good show, but it has become ridiculous in the past 2 seasons. Story 40. House MD. Is enjoyable when Dr. House's quirks highlight his genius, but not so much when they reveal his struggles with addiction. Story 41. Animal Kingdom suffers from a Homeland syndrome, in that the premise does not allow for more than 2 to 3 believable seasons. While it didn't deteriorate much in quality, there comes a point where one must face a reality. It is simply not believable that Baz is the only one who has been killed, aside from Smuff, who must go simply because there is no credible way to continue the show with such a domineering character still present. Craig is too foolish to last, Pope is too unstable, and Josh, while clever, irritates everyone and engages in many risky crimes himself. These dangerous, violent men are rightly terrified of Smuff, the matriarch, who is both essential to the show and necessarily limits it to 3 seasons unless she is removed. The show has a built-in half-life because the family exists so far outside the bounds of civilization, and the dangers of their lifestyle are so extreme that it's astonishing any of the boys survive to age 18, let alone long enough to pull off the outrageous capers they attempt. Story 42. Sons of Anarchy. It was never particularly great, but it was watchable at first. That didn't last long. Story 43. Paradise. After a few episodes, I was enthusiastic about it. By the end of the season, I regretted that. There may be more seasons coming, but they might have already ended the series. Story 44. BoJack Horseman is truly one of my favorite shows. In reality, it was The Rookie. I saw the blurb and was interested in seeing how a 40-year-old man was managing as a rookie in the police force. However, by season 2, it became tiring to watch. I dropped it after season 4 and still don't know how I managed to get that far. Story 45. Prison Break. The first season focused on escaping from prison, but later it involved government agents and conspiracy. Story 46. Heroes. The first season was excellent, but it declined due to the writer's strike and the decision not to make it an anthology as originally planned. Story 47. I don't know if anyone mentioned Grey's Anatomy, but I watched all 18 seasons. They have 21 seasons and are still producing more. For a while, it was part sunk cost fallacy and part comfort. The season 18 finale resolved the remaining loose ends for me perfectly, and I haven't felt the need to watch further. If I were to purchase it, I would only buy seasons 1 through 18. Story 48. Gilmore Girls. I lost interest in most Shondaland shows after season 2 or 3, but that might just be my preference. Story 49. Severance. Season 1 was excellent, a perfect 10 out of 10, but then season 2 came out, and I could not finish a single episode without getting distracted. I stopped trying after episode 3. Story 50. Servant had a compelling mystery and intriguing elements. However, it became apparent after a while that the creators had not fully resolved the setup, and it seemed unlikely they would do so anytime soon. This distraction eventually led me to stop watching. Story 51. Dexter. Season 1 was good, season 2 was great. Season 3 was forgettable, and then it peaked in season 4. Everything after that was disappointing. Story 52. I watched all of Ted Lasso and really enjoyed it, but I just unsubscribed and won't be watching the 4th season. It's the favorite show of someone who ruined my life. As everything was crumbling around me, I started to realize how toxic many of the relationships on the show are and how they are presented as something normal. Nate goes through many changes to show that he's a good person, but Ted's marriage counselor continues with his life, and everything is okay. No one even addresses how completely unethical and troubling that situation is. It's strange. Add to that Rebecca and Sam and Jack and Keely, and it feels like no one is discussing the serious issues surrounding power in these relationships. Does no one have access to legal representation? I just don't believe that. Anyway, the lack of accountability on the show and the lack of accountability in my life at the same time has turned me off completely. My boss sexually harassed me and my coworker, and apparently it's fine. She can go on spouting nonsense about being curious and not judgmental, claiming that she was inspired by Roy Kent's speech to Rebecca, but I cannot watch that show anymore. It disgusts me. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.